The market of Northvale bustled with early morning activity as vendors arranged their wares beneath a sky pregnant with rain. Autumn's chill had descended upon the countryside, leaving a thin veil of mist that clung to cobblestones and shop awnings alike. It was in this haze of commerce and gossip that Miss Elara Wynne arrived, her grey dress simple but immaculate, her posture betraying neither the weariness of her journey nor the weight of circumstance that had brought her to this place. "Pardon me, good sir," she addressed the market overseer, a portly man whose waistcoat strained against brass buttons. "I seek employment at Thane Manor. Might you direct me toward its gates?" The man's eyebrows lifted with curious suspicion. "Thane Manor, you say? What business has a young woman such as yourself with the Duke of Northvale's household?" Before Elara could respond, a shrill voice cut through the market's murmur. "Employment," she says, as if his grace would admit some unknown country girl into his hallowed halls. The speaker was a middle-aged woman, her face pinched with self-importance, her elaborate bonnet announcing her as someone of significance within the village hierarchy. "Mrs. Pembroke," the overseer acknowledged with a deferential nod. "I merely seek honest work," Elara replied, her voice steady despite the flush rising to her cheeks. "I have references from the Reverend Wynne of Millfield Parish." "Wynne!" Mrs. Pembroke circled Elara like a predatory bird. "You claim kinship with the clergy, yet arrive unannounced and unaccompanied. Most irregular indeed." The gathering crowd now pressed closer, abandoning their marketing to witness this unfolding spectacle. Elara clutched the simple silver pendant at her throat, the only inheritance from her mother, as though drawing strength from its familiar weight. "The Reverend was my uncle, madam. He has passed into God's grace, leaving me without protection." "How convenient," Mrs. Pembroke sniffed. "And now you seek the protection of Thane Manor? A most ambitious ascent for one so plainly circumstanced." Laughter rippled through the onlookers, and Elara felt each chuckle like a physical blow, yet she maintained her composure, grey eyes unwavering as she met the woman's gaze. "I seek not protection, but the dignity of labour." Dignity! The word was repeated with such mockery that several genteel ladies covered their mouths with gloved hands. "The Duke of Northvale has not accepted new household staff since the passing of his dear wife. His household runs with precision that would not accommodate untested elements." A tall figure materialized from the crowd, his face obscured by the brim of an elegantly simple hat. "And yet, Mrs. Pembroke, I believe the decisions regarding Thane Manor's staffing remain the Duke's prerogative, not the market's." The crowd parted as Sir Alaric Dawn, long-time advisor to the Duke, stepped forward. His silver hair and impeccable attire commanded immediate respect, silencing even Mrs. Pembroke's ready retort. "Sir Alaric," she curtsied, her voice honeyed now. "One merely wishes to spare his grace unnecessary disruptions during his period of mourning. Indeed, your concern for the Duke's sensibilities is noted." His tone was dry as autumn leaves. Turning to Elara, he appraised her with keen eyes. "You are the niece of Reverend Wynne of Millfield?" "Yes, sir. Elara Wynne. I knew your uncle, a man of uncommon integrity." He nodded almost imperceptibly. "Come, I shall escort you to Thane Manor. His grace will determine whether your services are required." Relief washed over Elara's features, though she permitted herself no smile, aware of the many eyes that tracked her movements, the many tongues that would wag upon her departure. "Most gracious, sir." As they left the marketplace, whispers followed like autumn leaves in their wake. "She'll not last a fortnight," someone murmured. "The Duke hasn't spoken more than 10 words together since Lady Thane's passing." "I wouldn't concern yourself with marketplace prattle, Miss Wynne," Sir Alaric said as they walked, his cane tapping a measured rhythm upon the cobblestones. "Northvale thrives on rumour as roses on rainfall." "I am accustomed to judgment, sir," she replied softly, "though I confess I did not anticipate such immediate scrutiny. Small communities guard their boundaries with particular vigilance, especially when they orbit around figures of consequence. The Duke's household represents more than employment to these people. It is the very centre of their social universe." The road curved upward, revealing Thane Manor in the distance, a grand stone edifice surrounded by formal gardens, now subdued by autumn's touch. Elara's heart quickened, not with intimidation, but with something akin to recognition, as though she had arrived at a destination long written in her destiny. "The Duke is selective in whom he admits to his household," Sir Alaric continued, "not from pride but from a desire for solitude. His wife's passing 2 years hence has left him altered." "I understand grief, sir," Elara said simply. Sir Alaric gave her a searching glance. "Perhaps you do, at that." He paused at the wrought iron gates that marked the estate's boundary. "I make no promises, Miss Wynne. His Grace may refuse you outright. He may not speak to you at all. But I shall present your case fairly. That is all I ask." As they approached the imposing entrance, a tall figure appeared at the top of the stone steps, broad-shouldered and severe, dark hair touched with silver at the temples, blue eyes as cold and distant as winter stars. Duke Rowan Thane observed their approach with a face carved from marble, betraying neither welcome nor rejection. "Sir Alaric," his voice carried across the courtyard, deep and precise, "I was not informed of visitors." "Your Grace," Sir Alaric bowed slightly, "may I present Miss Elara Wynne, niece of the late Reverend Wynne of Millfield. She seeks employment within your household." The Duke's gaze shifted to Elara, who curtsied with perfect composure. For a long moment, he said nothing, merely studying her as one might examine an unexpected chess move. Then, with the faintest arch of an eyebrow, "Employment, in what capacity?" Before Elara could answer, the manor doors opened behind the Duke, revealing a slender gentleman whose refined features were marked by calculation rather than kindness. His lips curved into a smile that failed to warm his green eyes as he surveyed the scene before him. "My dear cousin," he addressed the Duke, "surely you are not considering additions to the household staff, particularly in these uncertain times." The air between the men seemed to crystallize with unspoken tension. The Duke did not turn, yet his posture stiffened perceptibly. "Lord Garrick," Sir Alaric acknowledged, his tone notably cooler. "I was unaware you had returned from London." "Just this morning," Lord Garrick replied, descending the steps with theatrical grace, "and it seems I've arrived in time to witness quite the provincial drama unfolding on our very doorstep." The silence that followed Lord Garrick's proclamation stretched taut as a violin string. Duke Rowan Thane remained motionless, his gaze fixed on Elara with inscrutable intensity. The young woman stood her ground, neither shrinking from his scrutiny nor presenting herself with unbecoming boldness. Her simple grey dress, though faded from wear, was immaculate. Her hair, bound in a modest chignon, gleamed chestnut in the autumn light. "Perhaps, cousin," Lord Garrick continued, his voice smooth as velvet yet edged with something sharper, "you might wish to discuss such matters in private. The proprieties must be observed, even in charitable considerations." A muscle twitched almost imperceptibly in the Duke's jaw. "Indeed, Garrick, propriety has always been your paramount concern." The sarcasm was so subtle that it seemed to pass unnoticed by Lord Garrick, who merely smiled more broadly. "Family reputation is a burden we share, cousin. I merely offer my counsel as your nearest relation." "Your counsel is noted." The Duke turned his attention fully to Elara once more. "Miss Wynne, you were about to explain your qualifications." Elara inclined her head slightly. "I have managed my uncle's household since I was 16, Your Grace. I am proficient in household accounts, correspondence, and the maintenance of a gentleman's library. I also possess some skill in needlework and the arrangement of flowers. A veritable treasury of domestic virtues," Lord Garrick murmured, his tone making a mockery of her modest claims. Sir Alaric cleared his throat. "The Reverend Wynne's library was particularly noted in the county, Your Grace. His scholarly correspondence extended to Oxford and Cambridge." "Indeed." The Duke's interest seemed genuinely piqued for the first time. "And you assisted in this correspondence, Miss Wynne?" "Yes, Your Grace. My uncle suffered from rheumatism in his later years. I served as his amanuensis." The Duke considered this, his blue eyes measuring her with renewed attention. Lord Garrick stepped forward, positioning himself between them as though to physically interrupt their exchange. "Surely, cousin, we need not conduct interviews on the doorstep like common tradespeople. If you are determined to consider this application, let us at least observe the formalities." "Once again, your concern for decorum overwhelms, Garrick." The Duke's tone was dry. "Miss Wynne, you will accompany Mrs. Winters, our housekeeper, who will ascertain your suitability for available positions." As if summoned by his words, an older woman in a black dress and starched white apron appeared in the doorway. Her face was lined with years of service, her eyes shrewd but not unkind as they assessed Elara. "Thank you, Your Grace." Elara curtsied again, her composure unwavering despite the tension surrounding her. "Mrs. Winters will show you to the servants' hall," the Duke continued. "I shall speak with you again after you have been properly situated." Lord Garrick's expression darkened momentarily, before resolving into a mask of aristocratic indifference. How magnanimous! Though one wonders if Northvale has sufficient employment for all the destitute relations of country clergymen. Garrick. The single word carried the weight of command, stopping his cousin's insinuations more effectively than any elaborate rebuke. Mrs. Winters descended the steps with dignity befitting her position. "This way, if you please, Miss Wynne." As Elara followed the housekeeper into Thane Manor, she felt Lord Garrick's gaze upon her back, calculating, assessing, already plotting. The grand entrance hall opened before her. its polished marble floors reflecting the subdued elegance of ancestral portraits and tasteful furnishings. Despite its grandeur, there was a stillness about the place, as though the house itself held its breath, waiting. "You've caused quite a stir, young lady," Mrs. Winters remarked as they proceeded down a corridor. "His Grace has not personally involved himself in staffing matters since his wife's passing," Elara supplied quietly. "So I have heard." Mrs. Winters glanced at her sharply. "You seem well informed for a newcomer." "Grief is a universal language, Mrs. Winters. I meant no presumption." The housekeeper's expression softened fractionally. "Well said, though I caution you, Thane Manor operates according to strict hierarchies. Those who forget their place do not long remain." They descended a staircase to the servants' quarters, where the grandeur of the upper floors gave way to practical simplicity. A young maid with bright eyes and a quick smile looked up from polishing silver as they entered. "Clara, this is Miss Wynne," Mrs. Winters announced. "She may be joining our household. Show her to the blue room and help her settle her belongings." "Yes, Mrs. Winters." Clara bobbed a curtsy. "Welcome to Thane Manor, Miss Wynne." "Thank you, Clara," Elara replied with genuine warmth. As Mrs. Winters departed to attend to her duties, Clara approached Elara with undisguised curiosity. "Is it true you arrived with Sir Alaric himself? The whole kitchen is abuzz with it. He kindly rescued me from an uncomfortable situation in the marketplace." "Oh, that would be Mrs. Pembroke's doing, no doubt. She fancies herself the gatekeeper of Northvale society." Clara rolled her eyes expressively. "Don't mind her, she's all hat and no cattle, as my grandmother would say." Elara couldn't suppress a small smile at the girl's forthright manner. "You're very kind to welcome me so readily. We're not all stiff-necked here, despite appearances." Clara led her down a narrow hallway. "The Duke is stern but fair. It's Lord Garrick you'll want to avoid, like the plague, if possible." "I gathered there is some tension between the cousins." Clara lowered her voice. "Lord Garrick expected to inherit everything when the old Duke died. Then Master Rowan returned from the war to claim his birthright, and Lord Garrick has been smiling with daggers ever since." "I see." Elara filed this information away carefully. "Here we are." Clara opened a door to reveal a modest but clean chamber containing a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small chest of drawers. "It's not grand, but it's private. Most of the maids share rooms." "It's perfect," Elara said sincerely, placing her small carpet bag on the bed. "More than adequate." Clara watched her with frank assessment. "You're different from what we expected." "Oh, and what did you expect? Someone desperate or grasping?" Clara flushed slightly. "Begging your pardon, Miss Wynne. No offense taken. Desperation and dignity need not be mutually exclusive, Clara." A bell jangled somewhere in the corridor, summoning servants to their duties. Clara started. "That's the library bell. Sir Alaric will be wanting his tea. I must go, but I'll return later to show you around properly." Left alone, Elara methodically unpacked her few possessions: 3 modest dresses, undergarments, a worn Bible, and a small leather case containing her mother's silver pendant and her father's pocket watch. Beneath these lay a sealed letter, the wax impression bearing the insignia of her uncle's parish. She traced the seal with her fingertip, hesitating. "Not yet," she whispered to herself. "When the time is right." A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Opening the door, she found herself facing the Duke himself, his tall figure incongruous in the narrow servants' corridor. Elara stepped back in surprise, instinctively curtsying. "Your Grace, I did not expect—" Clearly, his expression remained unreadable. "I find directness preferable to the circuitous paths of social convention, Miss Wynne. Walk with me." It was a command, not a request. Elara followed him through a servants' passage that led unexpectedly to a glass conservatory, filled with plants and suffused with gentle light despite the overcast day. "Sir Alaric speaks highly of your uncle," the Duke said without preamble. "He claims the Reverend Wynne was a man of exceptional intellect and integrity. My uncle would be honored by such an assessment, Your Grace." "And what of you, Miss Wynne? Do you share your uncle's qualities?" The directness of his question caught her momentarily off guard. "I aspire to his integrity, Your Grace. As for intellect, I benefited from his instruction, though I make no claims to exceptional scholarship. Humility is commendable when genuine." The Duke stopped before a white camellia, its petals perfect against dark green leaves. "My household librarian departed last month for a position at Oxford. The library has fallen into disarray in his absence." Elara's heart quickened with sudden understanding. "You offer me the position of librarian, Your Grace. I offer you a trial, Miss Wynne. 1 month to demonstrate your competence. You will catalogue new acquisitions, restore order to the collection, and assist me with scholarly correspondence as needed. I am deeply grateful for the opportunity, Your Grace. Do not thank me yet." His gaze was penetrating. "Lord Garrick is correct about one thing. I have not hired new staff since my wife's passing. Your presence will disturb the established order of my household. If I may ask, your grace, why make an exception now?" The Duke studied her for a long moment, as though weighing the wisdom of candor. "Because, Miss Wynne, competence is rarer than beauty, more valuable than breeding, and infinitely more useful than flattery. Those qualities appear to be in short supply, even in the best households." Before Elara could respond, the conservatory door opened, revealing Lord Garrick accompanied by a tall, elegant woman whose resemblance to him marked her unmistakably as his sister. "Cousin, holding private audiences in the conservatory now?" Lord Garrick's voice dripped with insinuation. "How thoroughly unorthodox." The woman beside him laid a restraining hand on his arm. "Forgive our interruption, brother. I was merely showing Garrick the new orchid specimens." "Lady Isolde," the Duke acknowledged with a slight nod. "May I present Miss Elara Wynne, who will be assuming duties as under-librarian?" Lady Isolde's eyebrows lifted slightly, but her composure remained intact as she inclined her head. "Welcome to Thane Manor, Miss Wynne." Lord Garrick made no attempt to disguise his displeasure. "Under-librarian? How fascinating. I wasn't aware we were expanding the household staff during these financially constrained times." "The constraints you reference, Garrick, apply primarily to certain extravagant requests, not to necessary functions of the household," the Duke replied coolly. "Miss Wynne, you will begin your duties tomorrow morning. The library key will be provided by Mrs. Winters." With a final nod to Lady Isolde, the Duke departed, leaving Elara momentarily alone with the siblings. Lord Garrick's green eyes narrowed as he regarded her with undisguised assessment. "How fortunate you are, Miss Wynne, to have secured such rapid advancement in a noble household. One wonders what particular talents you possess to have so swiftly captured my cousin's attention." "Garrick," Lady Isolde hissed, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment, "you forget yourself." "Do I, sister? Or perhaps others forget their station?" His smile never reached his eyes. "Welcome to North Vale, Miss Wynne. I do so look forward to observing your progress." As he turned to leave, Lady Isolde lingered momentarily. "Please excuse my brother, Miss Wynne. Grief sometimes manifests as incivility in those lacking the strength to bear it nobly." With these enigmatic words, she followed her brother, leaving Elara alone in the conservatory, surrounded by perfect blooms cultivated far from their natural habitat, much like herself, transplanted into this rarefied world where every word carried double meaning and even kindness concealed calculation. Morning light filtered through tall windows, casting golden rectangles across the library's polished oak floor. Elara stood motionless in the doorway, momentarily overwhelmed by the grandeur before her. Floor-to-ceiling shelves housed thousands of volumes, their leather spines gleaming like jewels in the subdued light. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, its surface scattered with papers, correspondence, and opened books, evidence of the disarray the Duke had mentioned. "It's magnificent," she whispered to herself, inhaling the mingled scents of leather, paper, and beeswax polish. "It is also woefully disorganized," came a voice from behind her. Sir Alaric stood in the corridor, leaning slightly on his silver-topped cane. "His Grace has been attempting to manage it himself since Ellsworth's departure. The results have been less than satisfactory." Elara smiled. "Then I shall endeavor to restore order, Sir Alaric. A formidable task. The Duke's academic interests are exceptionally varied." He gestured toward the desk. "You'll find Ellsworth's cataloguing system explained in the ledger. His Grace prefers the Dewey Decimal System for non-fiction and alphabetical by author for literature and poetry. A sensible approach." "Indeed?" Sir Alaric studied her with keen eyes. "You've caused quite a stir in our little community, Miss Wynne. Not since Lady Thane's time has there been such interest in a new arrival at the manor." Elara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I assure you, sir, I seek only to perform my duties without drawing undue attention. A laudable intention, but one the fates seem disinclined to honor." His tone was not unkind. "Lord Garrick has already set tongues wagging with insinuations about your appointment. I gathered as much from yesterday's encounter." Elara's voice remained steady despite her discomfort. "May I ask, Sir Alaric, why you intervened on my behalf in the marketplace? You knew nothing of me beyond my uncle's name." "I knew your uncle, which is not nothing." Sir Alaric moved to examine a globe positioned near the window. "Reverend Wynne corresponded with me on matters of antiquarian interest for many years. He mentioned his niece, a young woman of uncommon intelligence and character. When I heard your name, I recalled his words." Elara's eyes widened slightly. "He never mentioned such a correspondence to me. The Reverend was a modest man, not given to displaying his connections." Sir Alaric turned the globe idly. The Duke needs someone who sees books as living things, not mere objects to be dusted and arranged. Ellsworth understood this. I believe you might as well. Before Elara could respond, the library door opened to admit the Duke himself, his tall figure momentarily silhouetted against the corridor light. He paused, observing their conversation with a raised eyebrow. Providing orientation, Sir Alaric. Merely welcoming Miss Wynne to her new domain, Your Grace. The Duke nodded and moved toward his desk, his movements precise and controlled. He wore a dark frock coat and waistcoat that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the leanness of his frame. Elara noticed that he touched the mourning ring on his left hand, a habitual gesture, perhaps unconscious. You will find several crates of new acquisitions in the alcove, Miss Wynne, he said without preamble. They require cataloguing before shelving. There is also correspondence requiring response. Those letters marked with a red seal take priority. Yes, Your Grace. Elara moved toward the alcove he indicated, but his voice halted her. A moment. He withdrew a small brass key from his waistcoat pocket. The key to the rare book cabinet. It contains first editions and manuscripts not to be removed without my express permission. Their fingers brushed momentarily as he handed her the key, and Elara noted how his hand withdrew swiftly, as though the contact had surprised him. His blue eyes met hers briefly before returning to the papers on his desk. Thank you, Your Grace. I shall treat them with appropriate care. Sir Alaric cleared his throat. I shall leave you both to your scholarly endeavours. The vicar expects me for chess at 11, and he grows quite irritable when kept waiting. As Sir Alaric departed, Elara became acutely aware of the Duke's presence. He had seated himself at the desk and was examining documents with intense concentration, seemingly oblivious to her. She moved quietly to the alcove and began unpacking the crates of books, organizing them by subject matter, before recording their details in the ledger. The morning passed in companionable silence, broken only by the rustle of paper, the scratch of quills, and the occasional soft thud of books being shelved. Elara worked methodically, her mind engaged with the pleasant challenge of bringing order to chaos. She was so absorbed that she started slightly when the Duke spoke. You handle them properly. Elara looked up, a leather-bound volume of botanical illustrations still in her hands. Your Grace? The books. He gestured to the way she cradled the tome, supporting its spine. Many people grab them by their spines or force them open until the binding cracks. You handle them as living things. Books have souls of a sort, Your Grace. They deserve respect. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My late wife said something similar once. She believed books absorbed something of their readers over time. Emotions, thoughts, even fragments of dreams. A poetic notion, Elara replied softly. Though perhaps not entirely fanciful, my uncle claimed he could tell which volumes in his library had been most beloved by their previous owners. The Duke studied her with renewed interest. And how did he determine this? By the places where the pages fell open naturally, the passages marked with pressed flowers or underlined in faded ink, sometimes by the faint imprint of tears on certain pages. Something shifted in the Duke's expression, a momentary softening that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Your uncle sounds like an uncommon clergyman. He was. Elara returned to her cataloguing, aware that she had revealed more of herself than perhaps was wise. The library door swung open abruptly, and Lord Garrick entered without knocking. His appearance was impeccable as always, dove-grey trousers, a waistcoat of deep burgundy, a pearl pin in his cravat. He carried a newspaper folded under one arm. Cousin, buried in books as usual, I see. His gaze shifted to Elara, a calculating smile playing at his lips. And your new librarian, already hard at work. How industrious. The Duke's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Was there something you required, Garrick? I'm rather occupied with estate matters this morning. Estate matters. Yes, precisely why I've come. Lord Garrick unfolded the newspaper with a dramatic flourish. The London Financial Chronicle reports that neighbouring properties have declined in value by 15% since last quarter. Most concerning for our investments. Our investments? The Duke's tone was glacial. I was unaware that we shared financial interests, Garrick. Family interests, cousin. We rise or fall together, do we not? Lord Garrick's smile widened, revealing teeth too perfect to be trusted. Which reminds me, I encountered the most fascinating gentleman in London last week. A Mr. Finch, representing certain investment opportunities in railway development. I took the liberty of inviting him to visit North Vale. You exceeded your authority, the Duke stated flatly. I have no interest in speculative ventures, particularly in railways. Progress waits for no man, cousin, not even a duke. Lord Garrick's gaze drifted meaningfully to Elara, who kept her attention fixed on her work, despite her acute awareness of the tension between the men. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in private. If you have business proposals to present, you may do so through proper channels. Submit them to Sir Alaric for review. The Duke returned his attention to his papers. Good day, Garrick. Lord Garrick's expression hardened momentarily before smoothing into practiced affability. As you wish, though I wonder if Sir Alaric's conventional perspectives serve your interests fully in these changing times. With a slight bow that managed to convey insolence rather than respect, Lord Garrick departed, leaving behind a palpable atmosphere of disquiet. The Duke remained silent for several minutes, his pen motionless in his hand. "Miss Wynne," he said finally, his voice controlled, "what do you know of railway investments?" Surprised by the question, Elara considered carefully before answering. "Only that they have created both great fortunes and great losses, Your Grace. My uncle considered them morally ambiguous, necessary for progress, yet often built on exploitation of labourers and landowners alike." A nuanced assessment. The Duke nodded slightly. "And what would you advise, hypothetically, regarding such investments?" "I would be wary of any venture presented with excessive enthusiasm and insufficient documentation," Elara replied carefully, "especially when promoted by those who stand to profit from one's participation rather than from the venture's inherent success." A brief expression of amusement crossed the Duke's features. "A diplomatic critique of my cousin's proposal. I meant no presumption, Your Grace. None taken. Your assessment aligns with my own." He rose from his desk, moving to the window that overlooked the formal gardens. "Lord Garrick has expensive tastes and limited means to indulge them. His eagerness to involve Thane estates in his schemes grows more transparent by the day." Elara remained silent, uncertain whether further comment would be welcome. The Duke seemed momentarily lost in thought, his profile severe against the light. Then, as if recalling her presence, he straightened and resumed his businesslike manner. "The correspondence on the side table requires attention," he said. "Draft responses as you deem appropriate. I will review them before they are sent." "Yes, Your Grace." As Elara moved to the table, a soft knock at the door heralded Clara's arrival with a tea tray. The young maid's bright smile faltered slightly as she sensed the room's atmosphere. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, Mrs. Winters sent tea." "Set it down, Clara," the Duke instructed without looking up from his work. Clara arranged the tray on a small table, then approached Elara with a folded note. "This came for you, Miss Wynne," she whispered. A messenger delivered it to the kitchen entrance. Elara accepted the note with a questioning glance. Clara merely shrugged and departed, leaving Elara to unfold the paper discreetly. The message inside contained only 5 words in an elegant, feminine hand. "Beware the favourite. Trust few." Puzzled, Elara slipped the note into her pocket, her mind racing. Who would send such a cryptic warning? And who was the favourite she should beware? "Is something amiss, Miss Wynne?" The Duke's voice startled her from her thoughts. "No, Your Grace. Merely a personal note." "I see." His tone suggested he did indeed see more than she might wish. "Tea? Thank you." Elara accepted the offered cup, noting how the Duke prepared it himself rather than asking her to serve, as would have been customary. As they sipped their tea in silence, the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the library floor. Outside, rain started to patter against the windows, a gentle rhythm that softened the edges of their silence. For a moment, the world beyond the library, with its scheming relatives, mysterious notes, and social hierarchies, seemed distant and insubstantial. "Do you miss it?" the Duke asked suddenly. "Your uncle's parish? The life you knew?" Elara considered the question with the honesty it deserved. "I miss certain aspects, Your Grace. The simplicity, the known quantities of each day. But life rarely permits us to remain in places of comfort indefinitely." "Indeed not." The Duke's hand moved unconsciously to his mourning ring. "Change comes, invited or otherwise, and we must adapt or perish," Elara finished quietly. Their eyes met briefly across the library, two souls acquainted with loss, recognizing in each other a similar resilience. Then the moment passed, and they returned to their separate tasks, as rain continued to fall, washing the world outside clean while inside, the shadows of the past and present lengthened with the approaching evening. In the corridor beyond, unseen by either, Lord Garrick paused outside the partially open door, his face darkening as he observed their quiet companionship. Beside him stood a slight nervous man with thinning hair and darting eyes, the very Mr. Finch he had mentioned. "Is that her?" Finch whispered. "The one you spoke of?" "Indeed," Garrick replied, his voice barely audible. "The perfect instrument for our purposes. Watch and learn, my friend. Even dukes can be manipulated through their weaknesses, and my cousin has just revealed his newest vulnerability." A fortnight passed swiftly, its days measured in the rhythmic turning of pages and the scratch of quills upon parchment. Elara found herself settling into the routines of Thane Manor with surprising ease. The library had transformed under her attentions. Books properly catalogued, correspondence organized, periodicals arranged by date and subject. Even the Duke had remarked upon the improvement, though his praise came in the form of brief nods and the occasional, "Well done, Miss Wynne." This particular morning found Elara alone among the books, transcribing the Duke's notes on a scientific monograph. Beyond the tall windows, October was painting the formal gardens in amber and crimson, the last roses of summer yielding gracefully to autumn's inexorable advance. She had just completed a particularly complex paragraph when Clara burst into the library, her face flushed with distress. "Miss Wynne, you must come quickly." The maid's voice trembled. "There's such a terrible commotion in the servants' hall." Elara set down her quill carefully. "What has happened?" "It's Mrs. Pembroke from the village. She's here with the constable. They're saying, oh, Miss Wynne, they're saying the most dreadful things about you." A cold foreboding settled in Elara's stomach. "What things precisely?" "They claim you're not who you say, that you've misrepresented yourself to gain the Duke's confidence. Mrs. Winters is trying to keep them from disturbing his grace, but Mrs. Pembroke is insisting on an audience." Setting aside her work with practiced composure, Elara rose. "Then we shall not hide from these accusations. Lead me to them, Clara." The servants' hall buzzed like an overturned beehive. Mrs. Pembroke stood at its center, resplendent in purple taffeta, her elaborate hat adorned with ostrich feathers that quivered indignantly with each emphatic gesture. Beside her, the village constable, a portly, uncomfortable-looking man, twisted his hat in his hands. Mrs. Winters faced them with rigid dignity, her back straight as a poker. Utterly improper that such a person should be permitted access to his Grace's private quarters, Mrs. Pembroke was declaring. "The reputation of Thane Manor is at stake." "Miss Wynne's position is entirely proper," Mrs. Winters replied coolly. "She serves as under-librarian, not lady's maid." "Under-librarian indeed, a most convenient fiction." Elara stepped forward, her grey eyes calm despite the flush rising in her cheeks. "I believe you are discussing me, Mrs. Pembroke. I would prefer to hear your accusations directly." The assembled servants parted like the Red Sea, creating a path between the two women. Mrs. Pembroke drew herself up, nostrils flaring with self-righteous indignation. "There, the shameless creature herself. Do you deny, Miss Wynne, if that is indeed your name, that you have gained employment through false pretenses?" "I deny nothing that is true, and affirm nothing that is false," Elara replied evenly. "What specific falsehood do you accuse me of perpetrating?" "Ha! She speaks like a barrister." Mrs. Pembroke turned triumphantly to the constable. "Note her educated manner, entirely inconsistent with her claimed background." The constable cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Pembroke has received correspondence, Miss Wynne, suggesting that Reverend Wynne of Millfield had no niece answering to your description." A murmur rippled through the assembled servants. Elara felt rather than saw Clara step closer to her side in silent support. "I see," Elara said quietly. "And the source of this correspondence?" "A most reliable authority," Mrs. Pembroke sniffed. "The churchwarden of Millfield Parish himself." "Ah," Elara nodded, something like relief flickering in her eyes. "Mr. Hargreaves, I presume?" Mrs. Pembroke faltered momentarily. "You know of him?" "Certainly. Mr. Hargreaves and my uncle maintained a cordial professional relationship, despite significant philosophical differences." Elara's voice remained steady. "Mr. Hargreaves believed women should receive only domestic education. My uncle's decision to educate me more thoroughly was a persistent point of contention between them." The constable frowned. "That doesn't explain his claim that Reverend Wynne had no niece." "No blood niece, perhaps," came a new voice from the doorway. Sir Alaric stood there, leaning on his cane. But if the constable would trouble himself to examine parish records, he would find that Reverend Wynne became legal guardian to his late sister's daughter following the untimely death of her parents. While not technically his niece by strict definition, Miss Wynne was raised as such and referred to as such within their community. Mrs. Pembroke's feathers drooped visibly. "Sir Alaric, with all due respect, this is a serious matter of..." "Of what, precisely?" Sir Alaric's eyebrows rose. "A young woman of impeccable character, seeking honest employment. Or perhaps the real issue is that she has earned the Duke's approval, which certain parties find unsettling." The constable, clearly eager to extract himself from the situation, tucked his hat under his arm. "Well, if Sir Alaric vouches for the young lady's identity, I see no cause for official concern." "But the letter," Mrs. Pembroke protested. "Might I examine this damning correspondence?" Sir Alaric extended his hand expectantly. With obvious reluctance, Mrs. Pembroke produced a folded paper from her reticule. Sir Alaric scanned it briefly, his expression growing increasingly sardonic. "Most interesting," he remarked, "particularly as Mr. Hargreaves has been dead these past 6 months, making his recent correspondence something of a miraculous occurrence." A collective gasp arose from the servants. Mrs. Pembroke blanched visibly, her mouth opening and closing without producing sound. That cannot be," she stammered. "And yet it is." Sir Alaric folded the letter and placed it in his coat pocket. "I attended the poor man's funeral myself. A case of apoplexy, as I recall." The constable backed toward the door. "Mrs. Pembroke, it appears there has been some mistake. I must return to my duties in the village." "Wait!" Mrs. Pembroke's voice had risen an octave. "There is still the matter of the silver pendant." Elara's hand flew instinctively to her throat, where her mother's pendant lay beneath her high collar. "What of it?" "A silver pendant with an unusual design was reported missing from Lady Vale's jewellery box just yesterday," Mrs. Pembroke announced triumphantly. "And you, Miss Wynne, have been seen wearing just such an item." Before Elara could respond, another figure appeared in the doorway, Lady Isolde Vale, her elegant features composed, but her eyes flashing with suppressed anger. "What absurdity is this?" she demanded. "I have reported no such theft." Mrs. Pembroke faltered. "But Lord Garrick said—" "Ah." Lady Isolde's mouth tightened. "I begin to understand. My brother has a regrettable tendency toward creative interpretations of reality when it suits his purposes." She turned to Elara. "I apologize for any distress this has caused you, Miss Wynne. I assure you none of my jewellery is missing." The tension in the room deflated like a pricked balloon. Mrs. Pembroke, her triumph transformed to mortification, gathered her skirts with as much dignity as she could muster. "Well, if I have been misinformed, then naturally, that is to say, one only sought to protect the Duke's interests." "Indeed," Sir Alaric said dryly. "His Grace will be most appreciative of your vigilance." As Mrs. Pembroke made her inglorious retreat, followed by the relieved constable, Lady Isolde approached Elara. "I must speak with you privately, Miss Wynne, at your convenience." "Of course, my lady. Perhaps this afternoon in the conservatory." Lady Isolde nodded, then departed with the quiet grace that characterized her movements. The servants, deprived of their morning's entertainment, gradually dispersed to their duties, leaving Elara with Clara and Sir Alaric. "Thank you, Sir Alaric," Elara said softly. "Your intervention was most timely." "Merely the truth, strategically deployed," he replied with a slight smile. "Though I suspect we have not heard the last of this matter." Clara squeezed Elara's hand surreptitiously. "Don't let them trouble you, Miss Wynne. Everyone below stairs knows you're worth 10 of Mrs. Pembroke and her gossip." As Elara returned to the library, her composure intact but her spirit disturbed, she found the Duke standing by the window, his profile severe against the autumn light. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "I am informed there was some disturbance regarding your credentials, Miss Wynne." Elara curtsied. "Yes, Your Grace, a misunderstanding that has been resolved." "Has it, indeed?" His penetrating gaze seemed to search for truth beyond her carefully chosen words. "Sir Alaric informs me that my cousin may have played some role in this misunderstanding." Lady Isolde was kind enough to clarify that no jewellery had been stolen from her possession, despite reports to the contrary. The Duke's jaw tightened. "I see." He paced to his desk, fingers drumming briefly on its polished surface. "Miss Wynne, in the interest of preventing further misunderstandings, I believe complete candour is required. The pendant you wear, it holds some significance to you, does it not?" Elara hesitated, then slowly withdrew the silver pendant from beneath her collar. Its design was unusual, a small book surrounded by a circle of intricately wrought ivy leaves. "It was my mother's, Your Grace. My only inheritance from her." The Duke studied it without touching it. "And your mother was Margaret Wynne, née Blackwood. She died when I was 7 years old." "Blackwood," he repeated thoughtfully. "From the northern counties?" "Yes, Your Grace, though she seldom spoke of her family. I understand there was some estrangement before her marriage." The Duke nodded slowly. "Thank you for your candour, Miss Wynne." He returned to the window, his back to her once more. "You may continue with the transcription." As Elara resumed her work, she could not shake the feeling that some significant exchange had just occurred, that pieces of a puzzle were slowly shifting into place, though the complete picture remained obscured. Outside, leaves spiraled from the great oak tree in the garden, their descent both beautiful and melancholy, like secrets finally surrendered to the inevitable pull of gravity. The conservatory glowed with afternoon light, transforming ordinary glass into a cathedral of luminescence. Lady Isolde Vale sat primly on a wrought-iron bench, surrounded by potted ferns and delicate orchids, her dove-grey dress a perfect complement to her fair colouring. When Elara entered, Lady Isolde motioned for her to close the door behind her. "Thank you for coming, Miss Wynne," Lady Isolde said, her voice cultured but lacking the affected drawl so common among the aristocracy. "Please sit with me. What I have to say requires privacy." Elara sat at a respectful distance, her hands folded in her lap. "I am grateful for your intervention this morning, my lady. It was the least I could do, given my brother's role in orchestrating that unpleasant scene." Lady Isolde sighed, removing her gloves with deliberate care. "Lord Garrick has developed a concerning fixation regarding your presence at Thane Manor. May I ask why? I am but a servant here." "Are you?" Lady Isolde's gaze was direct, almost challenging. "I think we both know your position is somewhat unorthodox. The Duke has never before taken such personal interest in a staff appointment, particularly not for someone without extensive references or connections." Elara maintained her composure. "His Grace required assistance with his library. My experience with my uncle's collection made me suitable for the position." "Perhaps." Lady Isolde smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. "Or perhaps there are other considerations at play. The pendant you wear, for instance." Elara's hand instinctively rose to her throat. "My mother's pendant has sentimental value only, my lady." "To you, certainly. To others it may hold different significance." Lady Isolde's voice lowered. "Have you examined it closely? The design is rather unusual. A book encircled by ivy leaves." "Yes, my mother was fond of literature." "As was the former Duchess of North Vale." Lady Isolde's words hung in the air between them. Her personal insignia was remarkably similar, a book surrounded by ivy, symbolizing knowledge preserved through generations. Elara's heart quickened, though she kept her expression neutral. "A coincidence, surely." "I think not." Lady Isolde leaned forward slightly. "Miss Wynne, or should I say, Miss Blackwood, I believe you came to Thane Manor with purpose beyond mere employment." The silence stretched between them, fraught with unspoken questions. Finally, Elara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you know of my mother's family, Lady Isolde?" "I know that Margaret Blackwood was the younger sister of the previous Duchess of North Vale. I know she was disinherited upon marrying a clergyman, against her family's wishes, and I know that the current Duke, her nephew by marriage, may be unaware of your connection to his family." Elara exhaled slowly. "You are remarkably well informed, my lady. I make it my business to understand the currents that flow beneath the surface of polite society." Lady Isolde replaced her gloves with methodical precision. "What I cannot determine is your intention. Do you seek recognition, compensation for past wrongs, or something more substantial?" "I seek only what is rightfully mine, acknowledgement of my mother's lineage," Elara replied steadily. "Not for financial gain, but for the truth. My uncle believed that truth has intrinsic value regardless of its consequences. A noble sentiment, though perhaps impractical in our world." Lady Isolde studied her thoughtfully. "And yet, I find myself inclined to believe you, which leaves us with a conundrum. My brother clearly suspects your heritage and sees you as a threat to his ambitions." "What ambitions would those be, my lady?" Lady Isolde's smile held no warmth. "Garrick has always coveted North Vale. As the Duke's nearest male relation, he once believed himself the inevitable heir. The Duke's marriage altered that calculation, though his wife's passing without issue restored Garrick's hopes." She paused delicately. "Until your arrival." "I make no claim on North Vale," Elara protested, perhaps not directly. "But as the daughter of the former Duchess's sister, your very existence complicates matters of inheritance, particularly if the Duke were to acknowledge your connection to his late wife's family." Understanding dawned on Elara. "And if the Duke were to remarry?" "Precisely." Lady Isolde nodded approvingly. "Garrick fears not only your claim to family connection, but the possibility that the Duke might develop a personal interest in you, an interest that could lead to marriage and potential heirs, thus extinguishing Garrick's prospects permanently." Elara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Lady Isolde, I assure you the Duke has shown no such interest. Our relationship is entirely professional. For now." Lady Isolde rose gracefully. "But Garrick perceives threats where none may exist. He acts preemptively, eliminating possibilities before they materialize. Is that why you warned me? The note, 'Beware the favorite, trust few.'" Lady Isolde inclined her head. "My brother has been the favored heir for years, positioning himself as indispensable to the Duke, while systematically undermining potential rivals. I love Garrick, Miss Wynne, but I harbor no illusions about his character. Why tell me this? Why risk your brother's displeasure?" "Because I have watched Garrick's ambitions poison his soul." Lady Isolde's voice softened. "And because I have observed the Duke these past weeks. His demeanor has lightened since your arrival." He speaks more at dinner. Sometimes I even detect the ghost of a smile when he mentions some discovery in the library. Elara looked away, unable to meet the knowing compassion in Lady Isolde's eyes. The Duke deserves happiness, whether or not it involves me. Indeed he does. Lady Isolde moved toward the door, then paused. One final piece of advice, Miss Wynne. The letter my brother forged to discredit you will not be his last attempt. He grows desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. Watch your step carefully and perhaps consider confiding in the Duke before Garrick forces the revelation in a manner less favorable to you. After Lady Isolde's departure, Elara remained in the conservatory, surrounded by exotic blooms that thrived despite being far from their natural habitat. Her mind whirled with implications. Should she approach the Duke directly? Would he welcome the revelation of her connection to his late wife's family, or would he see it as deception, a calculated omission that rendered her position untenable? Lost in thought, she barely noticed the conservatory door opening once more until a shadow fell across her hands. You seem troubled, Miss Wynne. The Duke stood before her, tall and imposing in his dark frock coat, his expression guarded yet curious. Elara rose hastily, cursing. Your Grace, forgive me, I was just leaving. No need to depart on my account. He gestured for her to resume her seat while remaining standing himself. I often come here in the afternoon. My late wife's favorite orchids are in bloom. Elara followed his gaze to a delicate spray of white flowers with crimson centers. They're beautiful, Your Grace. Alexandra believed flowers have souls, he said quietly. She claimed they respond not only to light and water, but to music and conversation. A faint smile touched his lips. I thought it fanciful until I observed how her orchids thrived, while mine withered despite identical care. Perhaps they sensed her affection, Elara suggested. Living things often respond to intention as much as action. The Duke regarded her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to search beyond her words. A perceptive observation, Miss Wynne. An awkward silence descended, broken only by the distant call of birds in the garden. The Duke moved to examine a flowering vine, his back partially turned as he spoke again. I understand you conversed with Lady Isolde. Yes, Your Grace. Might I inquire as to the nature of your discussion? Elara hesitated, weighing truth against discretion. Lady Isolde expressed concern regarding her brother's interest in my presence at Thane Manor. I see. The Duke turned to face her directly. And did she offer any insight into the motivation behind this interest? She suggested Lord Garrick might perceive me as potentially disruptive to his expectations regarding Northvale. The Duke's eyebrows rose slightly. An intriguing assessment. And what potential disruption might a librarian pose to my cousin's expectations? The moment stretched between them, fraught with unspoken possibilities. Elara sensed that her next words would irrevocably alter the delicate balance they had established. Before she could respond, however, the conservatory door burst open to reveal Clara, her face flushed with agitation. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, she curtsied hastily, but there's a dreadful commotion, Mr. Finch has arrived with papers for Lord Garrick, and Sir Alaric is saying they must not be signed without your review, and Lord Garrick is insisting it's a mere formality that doesn't require your attention and— Enough, Clara, the Duke interrupted, though not unkindly. I gather my presence is required in the study? Yes, Your Grace, Sir Alaric said most urgently. The Duke nodded, then turned back to Elara. We shall continue our conversation another time, Miss Wynne. For now I suggest you return to the library. These business matters can become rather heated. Of course, Your Grace. As the Duke departed with measured strides, Clara lingered, her eyes wide. Miss Wynne, she whispered, I heard the strangest thing while serving tea in the drawing-room, that Mr. Finch was talking to himself, practicing what he would say to his Grace, and he mentioned something about railway shares and transferring land rights. It sounded ever so important. Elara considered this information carefully. Thank you, Clara. Perhaps you should mention this to Sir Alaric when opportunity permits. I already did, miss. That's why he sent for the Duke so urgently. Clara lowered her voice further. And there's something else. Lord Garrick has a visitor staying at the village inn, a lawyer type, asking questions about the Northvale estate boundaries and the Duke's right to certain properties. A chill of foreboding settled over Elara. Clara, you've done well to share this. Please continue to keep your ears open, but do so discreetly. Lord Garrick must not know you're observing his activities. Clara nodded solemnly. I understand, miss. We all do. Even Mrs. Winters says Lord Garrick has a serpent's smile and a spider's patience. None of us want to see him get his hands on Northvale. As Clara hurried away to her duties, Elara made her way not to the library but to her small chamber, where she carefully unlocked the drawer containing her most precious possession, the sealed letter from her uncle bearing the parish insignia in wax. She had delayed opening it, waiting for the right moment, the proper circumstance. Not yet, she whispered to herself, but soon, very soon. Outside her window, clouds gathered on the horizon, their grey mass promising rain before evening. Like the approaching storm, Elara sensed that events at Thane Manor were accelerating towards some inevitable climax, one that would test not only her resolve, but the very foundations upon which she had built her careful plans. Rain lashed against the library windows, its rhythmic percussion underscoring the tension that had settled over Thane Manor like a shroud. 3 days had passed since Mr. Finch's arrival, 3 days of closed-door meetings and hushed conversations that ceased abruptly whenever Elara entered a room. Even the Duke had become more reserved, his customary morning visits to the library reduced to brief appearances and terse instructions. On this particular afternoon, Elara stood atop the library ladder, returning volumes to their proper places. The physical labor provided welcome distraction from her troubled thoughts. She had just shelved the final tome when the library door opened, admitting Sir Alaric. His normally composed features bore signs of fatigue and concern. "Miss Wynne," he greeted her with a slight bow, "I trust I find you well, despite our inclement weather." "Quite well, thank you." Elara descended the ladder carefully, though I confess the atmosphere within seems to mirror the storm without. An apt observation. Sir Alaric lowered himself into a chair with a sigh that spoke of accumulated years and burdens. "I fear Thane Manor faces a tempest more concerning than mere meteorological disturbance." Elara sat opposite him, hands folded in her lap. "May I inquire as to the nature of this tempest, Sir Alaric, or would that exceed the bounds of propriety?" "Propriety," he echoed with a wry smile. "A flexible concept, particularly when wielded by those who understand its true purpose, to protect the vulnerable, not to shield the powerful from consequence." He studied her thoughtfully. "You have earned my trust these past weeks, Miss Wynne. Perhaps more significantly, you have earned the Duke's regard, a commodity not bestowed lightly." "I am honored by both," Elara replied carefully. "Then I shall speak plainly. Lord Garrick has presented the Duke with documents purporting to be mere administrative formalities regarding certain railway investments. In reality, they would grant Garrick authority to leverage portions of the North Vale estate as collateral for highly speculative ventures. That seems extraordinarily presumptuous. Indeed, yet Garrick possesses a silver tongue and a predator's patience. He has spent years positioning himself as the Duke's most devoted advocate, while simultaneously laying groundwork for his eventual control of North Vale. Sir Alaric's expression darkened. "Had I not happened to review the documents, they might have been signed without full comprehension of their implications." Elara leaned forward slightly. "Surely the Duke would not sign such documents without thorough examination." "Under normal circumstances, no. But Rowan, His Grace, has been distracted of late. Furthermore, these particular documents were craftily constructed, their true purpose obscured beneath layers of legal verbiage." "I see." Elara considered this information carefully. "And now, has His Grace declined to sign?" "He has postponed any decision, much to Garrick's frustration, but delay merely forestalls the inevitable confrontation." Sir Alaric fixed her with a penetrating gaze. "Which brings me to the true purpose of my visit, Miss Wynne. I believe you possess information that may prove crucial to the Duke's understanding of his current situation." Elara felt her pulse quicken. "What information might that be, Sir Alaric?" "The contents of your uncle's letter, the one bearing the parish seal that you keep locked in your chamber." Surprise rendered Elara momentarily speechless. "How did you—" "Clara is devoted to you, but her loyalty to Thane Manor supersedes all. She mentioned your special letter during a conversation with Mrs. Winters, who naturally informed me." His expression softened at her evident distress. "I assure you no breach of privacy was intended. We are merely vigilant in these uncertain times." Elara gathered her composure. "The letter contains my uncle's final instructions and certain family information he believed I should possess." "Family information pertaining to your mother's connection to the former Duchess of North Vale, perhaps?" "You know, it was not a question. I suspected." "Lady Isolde recently confirmed my suspicions." Sir Alaric leaned forward earnestly. "Miss Wynne, or should I say Miss Blackwood, the time for concealment has passed. The Duke must be informed of your lineage before Garrick presents it as evidence of some nefarious scheme." "I never intended deception," Elara protested. "I merely sought the proper moment for disclosure. And yet, with each passing day, the revelation becomes more potentially damaging." What might have been accepted as understandable reticence now risks appearing as calculated manipulation. Sir Alaric's tone remained gentle despite his uncompromising words. The Duke values honesty above all virtues, Miss Wynne. Even difficult truths presented forthrightly earn his respect. Discovered secrets rarely receive such charitable interpretation. Elara rose, moving to the window where rain traced silvery patterns down the glass. You believe I should speak with him immediately? I do. And I believe you should share your uncle's letter, whatever it contains. Sir Alaric stood with effort, retrieving his cane. The Duke will be in his study until dinner. I shall inform him you wish an audience. After Sir Alaric's departure, Elara remained by the window, watching lightning illuminate the formal gardens in brief ghostly tableau. The decision had effectively been made for her, yet the prospect of revealing her true identity to the Duke filled her with trepidation. Not fear of rejection precisely, but fear of disappointment, that the man she had come to admire might perceive her actions as self-serving rather than principled. With resolute steps, she returned to her chamber, retrieving the sealed letter from its hiding place. The wax seal remained unbroken, its impression, the Millfield Parish insignia, a testament to her uncle's final communication. With trembling fingers she broke the seal, unfolding the parchment to reveal her uncle's meticulous handwriting. My dearest Elara, it began, if you are reading these words, I have departed this earthly realm for God's eternal kingdom. Do not grieve overlong, for I go willingly to rejoin your dear aunt and to worship at our Saviour's feet. I leave you with few material possessions, but a wealth of truth that has been too long suppressed. The letter continued, confirming what Lady Isolde had already revealed, that Elara's mother, Margaret Blackwood, had been the younger sister of Alexandra Blackwood, who became Duchess of North Vale upon her marriage to the current Duke's uncle. Margaret's decision to marry a clergyman against her family's wishes had resulted in her disinheritance and removal from family records, a situation that the former Duke and Duchess had maintained even after inheriting the title. Your mother never sought reconciliation, her uncle wrote, finding greater treasure in faith and family than in worldly recognition. Yet she kept the pendant, Alexandra's gift before their estrangement, as a reminder that love transcends human judgment. Upon her deathbed, she expressed but one regret, that the breach between sisters remained unhealed. The letter's final paragraphs contained the revelation that had propelled Elara to North Vale. Recent correspondence from Sir Alaric Dorne suggests that the current Duke, having lost his beloved Alexandra, seeks to honor her memory by rectifying past familial injustices. Your mother's lineage grants you no legal claim on the Blackwood or Thane estates, yet it entitles you to recognition as Alexandra's closest living blood relation. I urge you, not from worldly ambition, but from desire for truth, to present yourself at North Vale upon my passing. Bring this letter and your mother's pendant as testament to your heritage. May God grant you wisdom and the Duke receptivity to long-delayed justice. Tears blurred Elara's vision as she carefully refolded the letter. Her uncle's posthumous guidance had led her to North Vale, not in pursuit of fortune or position, but in search of acknowledgement, recognition of a connection severed by pride and prejudice. Now that quest had become entangled with threats to the very estate her aunt had cherished, threats embodied in Lord Garrick's machinations. With the letter securely in her pocket, Elara made her way to the Duke's study. She knocked softly, her heart thundering in counterpoint to the rain that continued to batter the manor's ancient stones. Enter, came the Duke's voice, deep and resonant, even through the heavy oak door. The study was a masculine sanctuary, its walls lined with maps and ancestral portraits, its furniture substantial and darkened by generations of use. A fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, casting flickering light across the Duke's features as he sat behind his desk, a tumbler of amber liquid at his elbow. Miss Wynne, he acknowledged her, gesturing to the chair opposite. Sir Alaric indicated you wished to speak with me on a matter of some importance. Yes, Your Grace. Elara seated herself, gathering courage as she met his steady gaze. I must confess that I have not been entirely forthcoming regarding my purpose in coming to Thane Manor. The Duke's expression remained impassive. Continue. My name is indeed Elara Wynne, as my uncle raised me from childhood following my parents' deaths. However, my mother's name before marriage was Margaret Blackwood, younger sister to Alexandra Blackwood, who became Duchess of North Vale upon her marriage to your uncle. If the Duke was surprised by this revelation, he concealed it masterfully. You claim kinship with my late wife. I do, Your Grace. My mother was disinherited upon marrying beneath her station. She never sought reconciliation, finding contentment in her modest circumstances. However, she kept this pendant. Elara touched the silver at her throat. a gift from her sister before their estrangement. The book encircled by ivy, the Duke murmured. Alexandra's personal emblem. Ah, yes, Your Grace. Upon my uncle's recent passing, I discovered this letter among his effects. She presented the unfolded parchment, watching as the Duke scanned its contents with increasing intensity. I came to North Vale, not seeking financial advantage, but simply acknowledgement of a connection that both my mother and aunt were denied opportunity to reconcile in life. The Duke set the letter aside, his gaze returning to Elara with new awareness. You might have presented this information immediately upon your arrival. I might have, yes. Elara met his gaze unflinchingly, but I wish to be known first as myself, to establish my character through actions rather than claims of lineage, however modest that lineage might be. A principled approach, if somewhat unconventional. The Duke's tone gave no indication of his thoughts. Why reveal this now? Because concealment, however well-intentioned, has become untenable. Lord Garrick suspects my heritage and may present it as evidence of deception. I would rather you heard the truth from me directly. Thunder rumbled overhead, momentarily drowning all other sounds. When silence returned, the Duke rose, moving to stand before the fire, its light casting his profile in stark relief against the wood-paneled wall. You bear remarkable resemblance to her, he said finally. Not in coloring. Alexandra was fair where you are dark, but in certain expressions, the tilt of your head when considering a difficult passage. I noticed it that first day in the library, but dismissed it as fancy, born of grief. I have a miniature portrait of my mother, Elara offered quietly. My uncle always said we shared more than appearance, that we possessed the same quiet determination. A Blackwood family trait, the Duke acknowledged, with the ghost of a smile. Alexandra could be formidable when principle was at stake. Before Elara could respond, the study door burst open without warning. Lord Garrick strode in, rainwater dripping from his greatcoat, his expression triumphant as he brandished a leather portfolio. Cousin, I've secured the final signatures for our railway venture. Mr. Finch assures me that— He halted abruptly upon noticing Elara, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Miss Wynne, how convenient to find you here. Insinuating yourself further into his Grace's confidence, I presume. That will do, Garrick, the Duke said coldly. Miss Wynne and I are engaged in private conversation. Private indeed. Lord Garrick's smile held no warmth. Perhaps you'd be interested to know, cousin, that your librarian harbours secrets that render her presence here most suspect. If you refer to her connection to the Blackwood family, she has just disclosed it fully. Lord Garrick's momentary discomfiture quickly gave way to renewed confidence. Has she disclosed all, I wonder, including her correspondence with certain railway investors who find direct negotiation with you challenging? What? Elara rose in shock. I have no such correspondence. No? Lord Garrick withdrew a letter from his portfolio. This document suggests otherwise. A letter in your hand, detailing potential access points to North Vale lands for railway development, discovered among Mr. Finch's papers. The Duke's expression hardened. May I examine this alleged correspondence? Lord Garrick presented the letter with elaborate courtesy. The Duke studied it briefly, then looked to Elara, his eyes unreadable. This appears to be your handwriting, Miss Wynne. It cannot be, Your Grace. I have written no such letter, conducted no such correspondence. Elara's voice remained steady despite her inner turmoil. May I examine it? The Duke handed her the document. Elara scanned it with mounting horror, while the handwriting bore superficial resemblance to her own. The content detailed intimate knowledge of North Vale's boundaries and suggested willingness to facilitate access for railway surveyors in exchange for financial consideration. This is a forgery, she stated firmly, returning the letter to the Duke. A skilled one, but a forgery nonetheless. Note the flourish on the capital T. I form mine with a straight ascender, while this curves distinctively. A convenient observation, Lord Garrick scoffed. The fact remains, cousin, that you have harboured a deceptive presence in your household, a woman who concealed her connection to your late wife, while simultaneously plotting with outside interests against North Vale. The Duke's gaze shifted between Elara and his cousin, his expression betraying nothing of his thoughts. These are serious allegations, Garrick. Indeed they are, which is why I took the liberty of inviting Mr. Finch and his associate to join us this evening. They can provide further evidence of Miss Wynne's duplicity. Lord Garrick's smile was that of a predator sensing weakness in its prey. Until then, perhaps prudence suggests certain precautionary measures. A terrible silence descended upon the study, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the persistent drumming of rain against leaded windows. Elara stood perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the Duke. waiting for his judgment with the quiet dignity that had characterized her presence at Thane Manor from the beginning. "I believe," the Duke said finally, his voice measured, "that dinner this evening shall prove most illuminating. Until then, Miss Wynne will continue her duties as usual." He turned to Elara, his expression grave. "I trust you will join us in the dining room at 8 o'clock. Mr. Finch and his associate should have opportunity to present their claims directly." "Of course, Your Grace," Elara replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "I welcome the chance to address these accusations openly." Lord Garrick's triumphant expression faltered momentarily. "Cousin, surely you don't intend to treat her as an equal at your table? The proprieties, Garrick, dictate that accusations of this magnitude be addressed with appropriate formality," the Duke interrupted coldly. "If Miss Wynne is indeed guilty of duplicity, she will face consequences. If, however, these charges prove unfounded, different consequences may ensue." The warning in his tone was unmistakable. Lord Garrick bowed stiffly. "As you wish, cousin." 8 o'clock then. As he departed, Elara turned to the Duke, her composure intact despite her inner turmoil. "Your Grace, I swear to you on my mother's memory, I have engaged in no correspondence with railway investors or anyone seeking access to North Vale lands. We shall determine the truth this evening, Miss Wynne." The Duke's expression softened fractionally. "Until then, I suggest you prepare yourself. Garrick is a formidable adversary when cornered." "As are Blackwoods, Your Grace," Elara replied quietly. "Or so my uncle always claimed." Something like approval flickered in the Duke's eyes. "Indeed, my late wife would have said the same." He moved toward his desk, signaling the end of their conversation. 8 o'clock, Miss Wynne. Dress appropriately for dinner and for battle." The grandfather clock in the entrance hall struck 8, its solemn chime reverberating through Thane Manor like a pronouncement of judgment. Elara stood before the mirror in her small chamber, studying her reflection with critical eyes. She had donned her finest dress, a modest gown of deep blue wool with a lace collar, simple yet dignified. Her chestnut hair was arranged in a neat chignon, and her mother's pendant rested visibly at her throat, no longer hidden beneath high collars, but displayed as a silent testament to her heritage. "Miss Wynne," Clara's voice called softly from the corridor. "His Grace asked me to escort you to the dining room." Elara opened the door to find Clara holding a small bouquet of white violets. "These arrived for you," the maid whispered, pressing them into Elara's hands. "From Lady Isolde's private garden. She said you might wish for courage in your buttonhole." "How kind," Elara murmured, securing a single bloom at her bodice. "Thank you, Clara." "Everyone below stairs is talking about tonight's dinner," Clara confided as they ascended toward the main floor. "Mrs. Winters says Lord Garrick has been strutting about like a peacock, and Sir Alaric has been closeted with the Duke all afternoon." "And the Duke? How does he seem?" Clara hesitated. "Quiet, miss. Very quiet. But not like before. Not sad quiet. More like thinking quiet. Like when there's lightning, and you're counting seconds before the thunder comes." They paused before the dining room's massive oak doors. From within came the murmur of masculine voices, Lord Garrick's cultivated drawl predominant, occasionally punctuated by nervous laughter that presumably belonged to Mr. Finch. Elara squared her shoulders, composing herself for the confrontation ahead. "Thank you for your friendship, Clara," she said softly. "Whatever happens this evening, know that I valued it greatly." "Don't speak as if you're leaving us, miss," Clara protested, her eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. "His Grace won't be fooled by Lord Garrick's tricks, not this time." With a reassuring smile that belied her own uncertainty, Elara nodded to the footman who opened the dining room door. Conversation ceased abruptly as she entered. The Duke stood at the head of the table, imposing in formal evening attire. To his right sat Sir Alaric, silver hair gleaming in the candlelight. To his left, Lord Garrick impeccably dressed in burgundy and black, a triumphant smile playing at his lips. Two unfamiliar men, presumably Mr. Finch and his associate, occupied chairs beside Lord Garrick, while Lady Isolde sat opposite, her expression composed but her eyes watchful. "Miss Wynne," the Duke acknowledged her with a slight bow. "Please join us." As Elara moved toward the empty chair beside Lady Isolde, Lord Garrick cleared his throat theatrically. "Cousin, surely Miss Wynne would be more appropriately seated at the lower end of the table given her ambiguous position." "Miss Wynne is seated precisely where I wish her to be, Garrick," the Duke replied, his tone brooking no argument, "directly across from her accusers, as befits this evening's purpose." Once seated, Elara faced the two strangers with quiet dignity. Mr. Finch proved to be a nervous, rabbit-like man with thinning hair and darting eyes, while his companion, introduced as Mr. Everett, a solicitor, possessed the calculating gaze of one accustomed to measuring human frailty in guineas and pounds. The first course arrived, clear consommé served in fine porcelain, accompanied by a silence so profound that the clink of silver against china echoed like distant gunfire. The Duke surveyed his guests, his expression unreadable. "I believe," he said finally, "that we should dispense with customary pleasantries and address the matter at hand. Lord Garrick has levelled serious accusations against Miss Wynne, suggesting she has engaged in correspondence with railway investors regarding North Vale lands. Mr. Finch, as the representative of said investors, you claim to possess evidence of this correspondence?" Mr. Finch nearly choked on his soup, casting a panicked glance at Lord Garrick before responding. Yes, Your Grace. Most irregular conduct indeed. The young lady approached us some weeks ago, offering to facilitate introductions and provide detailed information regarding North Vale's eastern boundaries, areas particularly suitable for railway development. "Approached you how, precisely?" Sir Alaric inquired, his tone deceptively mild. "Through correspondence, sir, most explicit in her offers." Mr. Finch fumbled in his coat pocket, producing the letter Lord Garrick had presented earlier. "This document outlines her proposal quite clearly." The Duke accepted the letter, studying it once more before passing it to Sir Alaric. "And you received this directly from Miss Wynne?" "Well, not directly as such," Mr. Finch admitted, glancing nervously at Lord Garrick. "It came through an intermediary, a local fellow who claimed acquaintance with the household." "Indeed?" The Duke's gaze sharpened. "And this intermediary's name?" Before Mr. Finch could respond, Lord Garrick interjected smoothly. "The specific channel is immaterial, cousin. The letter's contents and handwriting speak for themselves. On the contrary," Sir Alaric remarked, examining the document through his spectacles, "provenance is essential in establishing authenticity. Miss Wynne denies authoring this letter. If it came through an intermediary, we must determine whether that individual might have other motivations." Mr. Everett, the solicitor, leaned forward with the confidence of one accustomed to dominating conversations. "Your Grace, while these details are certainly fascinating, they distract from the central issue, namely Miss Wynne's deception regarding her true identity and connection to your family. A connection she has voluntarily disclosed," Lady Isolde observed quietly. "Hardly the action of one engaged in deliberate deception." "After realizing discovery was imminent," Lord Garrick countered. "Hardly a virtue to confess what can no longer be concealed." Elara, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. "If I may, Your Grace, I have never seen that letter before Lord Garrick presented it this afternoon. While the handwriting bears superficial resemblance to mine, it is a forgery. I have written no correspondence regarding North Vale lands, nor have I ever met or communicated with Mr. Finch or his associates." "Bold denials in the face of evidence," Lord Garrick scoffed. "Precisely what one would expect from a Blackwood," the Duke finished, his voice suddenly cold. "Yes, Garrick, precisely what one would expect from Alexandra's blood relation, courage in the face of calculated persecution." A collective intake of breath greeted this declaration. Lord Garrick's expression flickered between disbelief and calculation. "Cousin, surely you don't accept her claims without proof. This woman appears from nowhere, insinuates herself into your household, conceals her connection to your late wife, and now faces documented evidence of duplicitous dealings. Even you cannot be so blinded by whatever spell she has cast." "An interesting choice of words, Garrick." The Duke signalled for the footman to remove the barely touched soup course. "Particularly as I have spent the afternoon examining certain financial records that suggest a different interpretation of recent events at North Vale." The colour drained from Lord Garrick's face. "Financial records? Indeed. Discrepancies in estate accounts, unauthorised withdrawals, falsified expenditures, all traced to your hand." The Duke's voice remained steady, though the muscle in his jaw betrayed tightly controlled anger. "Funds diverted to personal investments, including substantial payments to a certain Mr. Everett, who appears to specialise not in legitimate legal practice, but in constructing elaborate schemes to separate gentlemen from their property." Mr. Everett rose abruptly. "I protest this characterization. My practice is entirely reputable." "Sit down," the Duke commanded, with such authority that the solicitor complied instantly. "Your reputation is well documented in certain circles, Mr. Everett. Sir Alaric has been corresponding with colleagues in London who remember your involvement in the Harrington estate scandal rather vividly." Lord Garrick's composure cracked visibly. "Rowan, whatever financial irregularities may exist, they are mere administrative oversights. As for Miss Wynne's letter—" "Ah, yes, the letter." Sir Alaric adjusted his spectacles. "Most curious. The paper bears a watermark from Jennings and Sons, stationers. a company that ceased operations 3 years ago. Yet the letter is dated last month. He smiled thinly. An oversight, perhaps? Mr. Finch began to tremble, his gaze darting between Lord Garrick and the door as though calculating the distance to escape. Your Grace, I may have been misinformed regarding certain aspects of this situation. Misinformed or handsomely compensated to misinform others? The Duke inquired coldly. Your association with Lord Garrick extends beyond railway investments, does it not? You serve as intermediary in his gambling debts he has been paying with North Vale funds. The silence that followed this accusation was absolute. Lord Garrick's face contorted with fury and fear in equal measure. These are baseless accusations. I have always acted in North Vale's best interests. No, Garrick, the Duke interrupted, his voice quiet yet devastating in its certainty. You have acted in your own interest while systematically undermining mine. The railway scheme was merely your latest attempt, selling access to lands you do not own to cover debts you should never have accrued. Lady Isolde spoke for the first time, her voice gentle yet firm. Brother, it is finished. The truth stands revealed as it inevitably must. You, Lord Garrick snarled, turning on his sister with sudden venom. You betrayed me, your own blood. For this upstart nobody. I chose truth over conspiracy, Lady Isolde replied steadily, as our father would have wished. The Duke rose, commanding attention without raising his voice. Mr. Finch, Mr. Everett, you will depart North Vale immediately. Consider any arrangements with Lord Garrick null and void. Should you attempt to pursue these schemes elsewhere, be assured that full documentation of your methods will find its way to appropriate authorities. The two men scrambled to their feet, Mr. Finch nearly upending his chair in his haste. Most reasonable, Your Grace. A regrettable misunderstanding, nothing more. We shall trouble you no further. As they retreated from the dining room, Lord Garrick remained seated, his knuckles white where they gripped the table edge. And me, cousin, what judgment have you prepared for me? The Duke regarded him without emotion. You will remove yourself from North Vale by morning. Arrangements have been made for you in London. Modest but sufficient accommodation, with an allowance that will maintain you provided you engage in no further gambling or speculation. Lady Isolde will remain here as my guest for as long as she wishes. Exiled, Lord Garrick whispered, disbelief evident in his voice. Cast out from my ancestral home while you install this fortune-hunting impostor in my place. Miss Wynne has made no claims on North Vale, the Duke replied coldly. Unlike you, she has sought neither property nor position, merely recognition of a truth long suppressed. The pendant she wears was Alexandra's gift to her sister. The resemblance between them is subtle but unmistakable. And most significantly, Reverend Wynne's letter confirms what Sir Alaric has suspected since her arrival, that she is indeed Margaret Blackwood's daughter and Alexandra's niece. Lord Garrick's bitter laugh held no humour. How convenient. And now that this revelation has transpired, what becomes of Miss Wynne? Elevated to family status, perhaps even more. The Duke's expression remained impassive, though Elara detected a slight tension in his shoulders. Miss Wynne's future at North Vale remains her choice. She has proven herself both capable and trustworthy, qualities you might have cultivated to greater advantage, Garrick. With deliberate care, Lord Garrick folded his napkin and placed it beside his untouched plate. You will regret this, Rowan. Blood is not so easily dismissed, nor family bonds so lightly severed. No, the Duke agreed, his gaze shifting briefly to Elara, which is precisely why Miss Wynne's connection to Alexandra merits acknowledgement after so many years of enforced silence. Lord Garrick rose unsteadily, pride warring with humiliation in his flushed countenance. I shall depart at first light. Lady Isolde, I presume you will not wish to bid me farewell, given your revised loyalties. You are still my brother, Garrick, Lady Isolde replied softly. I shall see you off, though I cannot condone your actions. With a final venomous glance at Elara, Lord Garrick departed, his footsteps echoing in the corridor like the retreat of a storm. The dining room fell silent, save for the gentle hiss of candles and the ticking of the ornate clock on the mantelpiece. The Duke remained standing, his expression inscrutable as he studied Elara across the expanse of damask and silver. Miss Wynne, he said finally, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. I owe you an apology for the distress this evening has caused. It seems that in seeking your rightful place, you have uncovered machinations that might otherwise have remained concealed until irreparable damage was done. No apology is necessary, Your Grace, Elara replied, her composure intact despite the evening's tumult. Truth often emerges through unexpected pathways. Sir Alaric cleared his throat gently. Perhaps, Your Grace, you might wish to inform Miss Wynne of your decision regarding her position at North Vale. The evening has been sufficiently dramatic without unnecessary suspense. The Duke's lips curved in a rare smile. "Indeed, Sir Alaric, always the voice of practical wisdom." He turned to Elara, his blue eyes warmer than she had ever seen them. "Miss Wynne, or perhaps I should say Miss Blackwood, I would be honoured if you would consider remaining at North Vale, not as under-librarian, but as official curator of the Blackwood collection." Alexandra began assembling rare volumes and manuscripts related to her family's history. "I believe you are uniquely qualified to continue this work." Elara's breath caught in her throat. "Your Grace, I am deeply honoured by your trust and generosity." "It is no more than is due to Alexandra's closest living relation," the Duke replied. "The position includes apartments in the East Wing, adjacent to the library, and an appropriate stipend." "Thank you, Your Grace. I accept with gratitude." Elara's voice remained steady, though her heart raced with unexpected joy, not merely at the position offered, but at the recognition it represented. After years of separation, the Blackwood legacy would be reunited under North Vale's roof. Lady Isolde rose gracefully. "I believe this calls for celebration, rather than the sombre dinner we anticipated. Perhaps we might adjourn to the drawing room for something more festive than confrontation?" As they left the dining room, Sir Alaric fell into step beside Elara. "You have navigated treacherous waters with remarkable poise, my dear. Alexandra would have been proud of your dignity throughout this ordeal." "I had excellent examples to follow," Elara replied softly. "My uncle taught me that truth requires neither embellishment nor apology, merely patience. A wise man indeed." Sir Alaric glanced ahead to where the Duke walked with Lady Isolde. "I believe North Vale stands on the threshold of a new chapter, one where old wrongs may be righted and fresh possibilities explored." Elara followed his gaze, watching as the Duke's tall figure moved through the corridor, no longer burdened by suspicion, but animated with renewed purpose. "I pray it may be so, Sir Alaric, for all our sakes." Outside, the storm that had raged all evening began to subside, its fury spent against North Vale's ancient stones. Like the tempest, Lord Garrick's schemes had broken against the bedrock of truth, revealing not destruction but possibility in their wake. As Elara stepped into the drawing room, the Duke turned, extending his hand in welcome, a gesture that bridged more than physical distance, offering reconciliation not merely with the present, but with a past too long fragmented by pride and circumstance. Spring came to North Vale like a whispered promise, touching the formal gardens with tentative colour and coaxing new life from soil long dormant beneath winter's grip. 4 months had passed since Lord Garrick's departure. 4 months of gradual transformation as the manor emerged from the shadow of deception into the clear light of honest purpose. Elara stood by the library window, observing the gardeners at work below. They moved with practiced efficiency, preparing beds for summer planting under the direction of the head gardener, whose family had tended North Vale's grounds for 3 generations. So much of the estate functioned this way. Knowledge and responsibility passed from hand to hand, generation to generation, creating continuity amid inevitable change. "Contemplating horticultural improvements, Miss Blackwood," Sir Alaric's voice interrupted her reverie. Since her formal acknowledgement as Alexandra's niece, Elara had adopted her mother's maiden name, not from ambition, but as recognition of a heritage too long denied. "Merely appreciating the persistence of renewal," she replied, turning to greet him with a warm smile. "No matter how harsh the winter, spring insists upon its moment." "A philosophical observation worthy of your uncle." Sir Alaric settled into his customary chair by the fire, which burned low despite the season's warming trend. "I bring news from London that may interest you. Lord Garrick has departed for the continent, Vienna, according to my sources. I hope he finds peace there," Elara said sincerely. "Lady Isolde will be relieved to know he is establishing himself elsewhere." "Indeed, though I suspect relief may be tempered by concern for his financial management. The Duke's allowance is generous, but not unlimited, particularly given Garrick's expensive tastes." Elara returned to her desk, where a collection of leather-bound journals awaited cataloguing. "These are Alexandra's personal diaries," she explained, noting Sir Alaric's curious glance. "The Duke discovered them in a locked cabinet in his study and suggested I might incorporate them into the Blackwood collection." "A significant gesture of trust," Sir Alaric observed, his keen eyes studying her with characteristic perception. "Rowan guards Alexandra's memory with particular devotion." "As is proper," Elara replied, carefully opening the earliest volume, dated 15 years prior. "I approach these records with the reverence they deserve, windows into a life that shaped North Vale profoundly, and continues to shape it through unexpected channels." Sir Alaric's tone held meaning beyond his words. The Duke has mentioned plans for a memorial garden in Alexandra's honor. I believe he intends to consult you regarding suitable plantings. Me? Surely the head gardener would be more knowledgeable. About horticulture, certainly. About Alexandra's preferences and sensibilities, I believe you offer unique perspective, both as her relation and as someone who shares her appreciation for symbolic meaning. Before Elara could respond, the library door opened to admit the Duke himself. He appeared more vigorous than in previous months, his bearing straighter, his expression less guarded. Country pursuits had brought healthy color to his face, and though he still wore his mourning ring, it seemed now a tribute rather than a shackle. "Sir Alaric, Miss Blackwood," he greeted them with a slight bow. "I trust I find you well this morning?" "Exceedingly well, Your Grace," Sir Alaric replied. "I was just informing Miss Blackwood of your plans for the memorial garden." "Ah, yes." The Duke moved to the window, surveying the grounds with proprietary satisfaction. "The eastern terrace receives perfect morning light, Alexandra's favorite time for reading outdoors. I thought perhaps a combination of her preferred blooms. Roses, certainly, but also less formal plantings, wildflowers that might have graced Millfield Gardens." Elara's heart warmed at his thoughtfulness. "My mother kept a small herb garden with pockets of wildflowers, cornflowers and Queen Anne's lace among the lavender and thyme. Alexandra might have shared similar memories from their childhood." Precisely the insight I sought. The Duke turned from the window, his blue eyes meeting hers with unexpected warmth. "Would you walk with me to view the proposed location? Your perspective would be invaluable." Sir Alaric rose with suspiciously convenient haste. "You must excuse me. Promised the vicar a game of chess this morning. Ecclesiastical diplomacy, you understand." As he departed with a knowing smile that brought heat to Elara's cheeks, the Duke offered his arm. "Shall we, Miss Blackwood? The morning is exceptionally fine." They proceeded through the manor and out onto the terrace, where spring sunshine bathed the stone balustrade in golden light. Below them, the formal gardens stretched in geometric precision, while beyond lay rolling parkland dotted with ancient oaks. The Duke led her along the eastern terrace to a sheltered alcove furnished with a stone bench. "Alexandra would sit here for hours," he explained, his voice softening with memory. "Especially in spring, when the light holds particular clarity. She claimed it was perfect for reading without straining the eyes. A practical consideration alongside aesthetic appreciation," Elara observed. "That seems consistent with what I've learned of her from her journals." "You've begun reading them, then?" "Only the earliest volume so far. She writes of her first impressions of North Vale, her awe at its grandeur balanced by concern that she might never feel truly at home within its walls." The Duke's expression grew thoughtful. "She confided similar fears to me, though later she came to love North Vale as deeply as those born to it." He gestured to the empty space beside the alcove. "I thought perhaps here, a garden enclosed by low yew hedges, with a sundial at its center and plantings arranged to bloom successively throughout the seasons. Alexandra believed gardens should never sleep entirely." "A lovely tribute," Elara said softly. "And the sundial seems particularly appropriate given her awareness of time's passage." "You've discerned that already. From a single journal. She marks each entry not only with the date but with observations of time's effects, how light changes, how plants develop, how perspectives shift with experience." Elara smiled. "It's quite beautiful, actually. Her commitment to recording not merely events but their implications." The Duke studied her with newfound interest. "You understand her in ways few others have managed. Even I, who lived alongside her for years, sometimes failed to fully comprehend the depth of her perceptions. Perhaps because you were part of her daily reality, while I approach her writings as precious artifacts, each phrase a window into a mind I can know only through such glimpses." Elara gazed across the parkland, suddenly wistful. "I wonder often what might have transpired had my mother reconciled with Alexandra, what conversations they might have shared, what understanding might have grown between them as women, not merely as sisters separated by circumstance." "A question without answer," the Duke acknowledged quietly, though perhaps not without remedy in certain respects. "Your Grace, the breach between sisters cannot be healed directly, but perhaps through you, through your presence at North Vale and your stewardship of Alexandra's legacy, some measure of reconciliation might yet be achieved." The Duke's gaze held hers with unexpected intensity. "The past months have demonstrated your commitment to truth and your capacity for understanding. Alexandra would have valued both immensely." Elara felt a curious lightness in her chest, as though some long-carried burden had begun to lift. "Thank you, Your Grace. That means more than I can adequately express." They continued walking along the terrace, discussing plantings for the memorial garden with growing animation. The Duke revealed surprising knowledge of horticulture. another interest shared with his late wife, while Elara contributed recollections of her mother's modest garden at the Millfield parsonage. Their conversation flowed with increasing ease, punctuated by moments of shared insight that seemed to bridge the formal distance between them. As they completed their circuit of the terrace, the Duke paused, his expression suddenly serious. "Miss Blackwood, there is another matter I wish to discuss, one of some delicacy." "Of course, Your Grace. Your position as curator of the Blackwood collection has been formalized in estate documents, ensuring its continuance regardless of future circumstances. However, I have been contemplating a more comprehensive acknowledgement of your place within Alexandra's family." Elara's heart quickened, though she maintained her composure. "I'm not certain I understand your meaning, Your Grace. I wish to establish a trust in your name. A portion of the Blackwood inheritance that would have come to your mother had circumstances been different. Not a matter of charity, you understand, but of justice long delayed." "Your Grace, Elara faltered, overwhelmed by the implication of his words. "Such generosity is unnecessary. My position here provides more than adequate compensation." "It is not a question of compensation, Miss Blackwood, but of rightful recognition." The Duke's voice held quiet authority. "Alexandra would have wished it. Indeed, her journals from the final year of her life express regret that she never attempted reconciliation with Margaret. This trust represents a small step toward addressing that regret." Elara considered his words carefully before responding. "I am deeply moved by your intention, Your Grace. However, I would ask that instead of establishing a trust in my name, those funds might be directed toward educational opportunities for young women of limited means. My mother found greater fulfillment in helping others advance than in material comfort for herself." The Duke regarded her with evident surprise, followed by something warmer, approval mingled with admiration. "A most worthy alternative. We might establish a scholarship foundation in both sisters' names, the Blackwood Educational Trust for Young Women. Would that satisfy your sense of justice while honoring your mother's values?" "Perfectly," Elara replied, unable to suppress her smile. "It would bring meaning to their estrangement by ensuring others need not face similar limitations." "Then it shall be done." The Duke offered his arm once more as they turned back toward the manor. "Your uncle was fortunate indeed to have such a thoughtful niece, Miss Blackwood, as was Alexandra, though she never knew it." "I was equally fortunate in my guardianship," Elara replied. "My uncle taught me that true worth lies not in status or possession, but in one's contribution to others' welfare." As they approached the manor, Lady Isolde emerged onto the terrace, her face lighting with pleasure at the sight of them. "Ah, I wondered where you both had disappeared to. The architect has arrived to discuss renovations to the east wing. Shall I tell him you'll be delayed?" "Not at all," the Duke replied smoothly. "Miss Blackwood and I were just concluding our discussion of the memorial garden. The architect's timing is most convenient." Lady Isolde's knowing smile suggested she found this explanation unconvincing, but she merely nodded. "Very well. He awaits you in the drawing room with preliminary sketches. Miss Blackwood, you might wish to join us. The library extension affects your domain directly." "Of course, Lady Isolde. I would be delighted." As they proceeded inside, Elara felt a curious sense of belonging, not merely as curator, or even as Alexandra's acknowledged relation, but as someone whose perspective was valued, whose presence contributed meaningfully to North Vale's continuing evolution. The manor no longer seemed an imposing edifice separate from herself, but a living entity, of which she formed an integral part. The architect proved to be a young man with innovative ideas, balanced by respect for North Vale's architectural heritage. His proposals for expanding the library, while maintaining its historical integrity, sparked animated discussion, with Elara contributing practical considerations regarding the Blackwood collection's optimal arrangement. "Miss Blackwood raises excellent points regarding natural light," the Duke observed, studying the sketches with newfound enthusiasm. "Perhaps if the new reading room were oriented eastward, with additional windows along the southern exposure." The architect nodded eagerly. "A most astute suggestion, Your Grace. The morning light would indeed be preferable for scholarly pursuits, while afternoon sun often proves too harsh for comfort." Lady Isolde, observing their exchange with quiet satisfaction, leaned toward Elara. "I haven't seen Rowan this engaged with North Vale's future since Alexandra's passing," she murmured. "You've brought something essential back to this house, Miss Blackwood, something beyond bloodlines or collections." "What might that be, Lady Isolde?" "Purpose," she replied simply. "And perhaps, though he may not yet recognize it fully, hope." As the discussion continued, Elara found herself drawn into planning not merely for the present arrangement of books and manuscripts, but for North Vale's legacy extending decades into the future. The Duke solicited her opinion on matters ranging from practical storage solutions to aesthetic considerations, treating her input not as subordinate suggestion but as valued counsel. When the architect finally departed with revised sketches and enthusiastic assurances, the three of them lingered in the drawing room, afternoon sunlight casting long shadows across the Persian carpet. Sir Alaric joined them, bearing news from the village that engaged them in further conversation until the dinner hour approached. "Will you join us this evening, Miss Blackwood?" the Duke inquired as they prepared to separate for appropriate attire. "I believe Cook has prepared that apple tart you mentioned enjoying." "Thank you, Your Grace, I would be honoured." Elara curtsied slightly before departing for her chambers, her spirit lighter than it had been since her arrival at North Vale so many months before. As she dressed for dinner, selecting a gown of sage green that complemented her colouring while maintaining appropriate modesty, Elara reflected on the day's developments. The Duke's proposal of the Educational Trust represented more than financial provision. It acknowledged a legacy long suppressed and offered possibility to others who might otherwise face limitations similar to those her mother had encountered. Yet, beyond this formal recognition, something more subtle had shifted between them, a gradual dissolution of the barriers imposed by rank and circumstance. In their discussion of the memorial garden, in their shared appreciation of Alexandra's journals, in their collaborative planning for North Vale's future, they had discovered common ground that transcended their outward differences. Whether this newfound understanding might develop into something deeper remained uncertain, its potential delicate as spring's first blossoms. But as Elara secured her mother's pendant at her throat and surveyed her reflection with critical eyes, she allowed herself to acknowledge the quiet hope taking root within her heart, not merely for her own happiness, but for the healing of old wounds and the flourishing of new possibilities beneath North Vale's ancient roof. Autumn had returned to North Vale, painting the formal gardens in amber and crimson, as though completing a cycle begun on that distant market day 1 year prior. Elara stood in the memorial garden, now flourishing despite its recent establishment. Late roses nodded beside stalwart asters, while ornamental grasses swayed in the gentle breeze. At the garden's centre, the sundial gleamed in afternoon light, its Latin inscription a testament to endurance. Tempus fugit, amor manet. Time flies, love remains. "I thought I might find you here," came the Duke's voice behind her. "You seem drawn to this place at day's end." Elara turned with a smile, no longer startled by his quiet approaches. The light holds particular beauty at this hour, neither the harsh clarity of noon nor the obscurity of twilight, but something more nuanced between them, a philosophical observation worthy of Alexandra. The Duke joined her beside a rosebush, still valiantly producing blooms despite the season's advance. She, too, preferred these transitional moments, dawn and dusk, the liminal spaces between defined states. "I've discovered many such similarities through her journals." Elara gently touched a rose petal, perfect despite its lateness. "Sometimes I feel I know her better through her written thoughts than many who encountered her in person. Perhaps because she revealed herself more fully in private reflection than in public interaction." The Duke's voice held no reproach, merely recognition of a truth he had long understood. Alexandra maintained certain necessary barriers as ducal consort, as keeper of North Vale's traditions. Only in her garden and her writings did she permit herself complete authenticity. "A constraint many women recognize," Elara observed, "the necessity of conforming to external expectations while preserving one's essential self apart from observation." The Duke studied her with that penetrating gaze that had become familiar over months of shared conversations. "You have maintained that balance with remarkable grace, Miss Blackwood. Your management of the collection, your contributions to the Educational Trust, your discreet guidance in household matters, all accomplished without surrendering your fundamental integrity. Thank you, Your Grace, though I would suggest that integrity becomes easier to maintain when one is valued for it rather than despite it." "Indeed." The Duke gestured toward a stone bench positioned to catch the last warmth of afternoon sun. "Would you sit with me a moment? There is a matter I wish to discuss." Elara complied, arranging her skirts with automatic grace, while noting the unusual tension in the Duke's bearing. Normally composed to the point of inscrutability, he now exhibited subtle signs of disquiet, fingers that briefly touched his signet ring, shoulders held with conscious rigidity. "Miss Blackwood, Elara," he began, then paused as though reconsidering his approach. "Forgive me. This proves more challenging than anticipated, despite considerable rehearsal." Intrigued by this uncharacteristic uncertainty, Elara waited, her hands folded in her lap. her expression encouraging without presumption. Over the past year, he continued finally, North Vale has undergone transformation beyond mere architectural renovation. Your presence has catalyzed changes I once believed impossible, not merely in the organization of Alexandra's collection or the establishment of the educational trust, but in the very spirit of the household. I am gratified to have contributed positively to North Vale's evolution, Elara replied carefully. You have done more than contribute, Elara. You have restored balance that was lost between past and future, between obligation and possibility. The Duke drew a measured breath. In recent months I have come to value not only your competence, but your perspective, your quiet strength, your fundamental understanding of what North Vale represents beyond mere property or title. Elara's heart quickened, though she maintained her outward composure. North Vale deserves such understanding. It is more than stone and land. It is continuity, responsibility, legacy. Precisely. The Duke's blue eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. And it is that understanding which compels me to ask whether you might consider a more permanent role in North Vale's future, not merely as curator or as Alexandra's acknowledged relation, but as its mistress, as my wife. Though she had begun to anticipate the direction of his words, their actual utterance momentarily robbed Elara of speech. She gazed at him, searching his expression for confirmation of what she had heard. I realize this proposal may seem precipitous, he continued, misinterpreting her silence. If you require time for consideration— No, Elara interrupted softly. That is, I don't require additional time. I merely wish to ensure I understand fully what you are offering. The Duke's expression softened. I offer partnership, Elara, not merely in name or in social standing, but in purpose. In these months of working alongside you, I have come to recognize that true compatibility rests not in circumstantial similarity, but in shared values, in mutual respect for truth, in commitment to meaningful legacy, in recognition of dignity beyond convention. And what of love, Your Grace? Elara asked quietly. Does it find place in this partnership you envision? For the first time, uncertainty flickered in the Duke's steadfast gaze. I have known grand passion, Elara. Alexandra and I shared such love in our early years, consuming, transformative, at times overwhelming in its intensity. What has grown between us is different, more measured perhaps, but no less profound. It is recognition rather than discovery, confirmation rather than revelation. Like returning to a place one has always belonged though never previously visited, Elara suggested. Yes. Relief and something deeper illuminated his features. Precisely that. You understand me as few ever have, not through dramatic declaration but through consistent recognition. Elara considered his words, weighing not merely their immediate appeal, but their enduring implications. When I came to North Vale, she said finally, I sought only acknowledgement of truth long denied. I never anticipated that truth might lead to such possibility. Is that possibility welcome, Elara, or merely unexpected? In answer, she extended her hand, allowing him to take it between both of his. Both welcome and unexpected, Your Grace. Like many of life's most valuable gifts. Rowan, he corrected gently. If we are to build this future together, I would have you use my name, at least in private conversation. Rowan, she repeated, the intimacy of it both strange and natural on her lips. I accept your proposal, not from ambition or circumstance, but from recognition of what we might accomplish together. For North Vale, for the educational trust, for ourselves. Joy transformed his features, erasing years of solitude and restraint. You honor me with your acceptance, Elara, more than I can adequately express. With deliberate care, he removed his mourning ring, the symbol of grief he had worn since Alexandra's passing, and placed it in an inner pocket. From another pocket, he withdrew a different ring, not an elaborate showpiece of ostentatious wealth, but an elegant band of gold set with a single perfect sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds. This belonged to my grandmother, he explained, holding it between them. Alexandra preferred more elaborate jewelry, so this remained in the family vault. I believe it suits your particular elegance, substantial without extravagance, distinctive without ostentation. As he slipped it onto her finger, Elara was struck by its perfect fit, as though it had been crafted for her hand across generations yet to come. It's beautiful, she said simply, and meaningful beyond its beauty. There will be those who question our match, Rowan warned, though his expression remained serene. Society may wonder at my choice of Alexandra's relation rather than someone from their approved circles. Let them wonder, Elara replied with quiet confidence. True dignity requires neither explanation nor apology, merely consistent demonstration of its worth. He smiled then, the full transformation of his features, revealing the man he might have been without grief's constraints. Once again, you distill to essence what others might expand to tedious justification. We shall face whatever questions arise with the same unity of purpose that has characterized our collaboration thus far. As afternoon light mellowed toward evening, they remained in the memorial garden, discussing practical arrangements for their future with the same thoughtful consideration they had applied to North Vale's renovation. Their conversation flowed naturally between pragmatic details and deeper implications, neither avoiding difficult subjects nor dwelling unnecessarily on potential obstacles. When the dinner bell sounded in the distance, they rose by mutual accord, walking arm in arm toward the manor that had witnessed their separate arrivals and would now accommodate their joint future. At the terrace steps, Rowan paused, turning to face Elara with sudden solemnity. "Before we share our news with the household, I wish to thank you, Elara, not merely for your acceptance, but for your presence this past year. When you arrived at North Vale, I existed rather than lived, maintaining tradition without purpose, preserving legacy without vision. You restored the essential element Alexandra's passing had taken with it." "And what element might that be?" Elara asked, though she suspected his answer. "Hope," he replied simply. "Not merely for continuation, but for genuine flourishing, for a future that honors the past without being constrained by it." As they entered North Vale together, Elara touched her mother's pendant, now worn alongside her engagement ring, as dual symbols of reconciliation, long delayed, yet finally achieved. The breach between sisters could never be directly healed, but through this unexpected union, their separate legacies would merge into shared purpose, transforming division into harmony, separation into connection, loss into renewal. Outside, autumn's golden light faded gradually toward evening, illuminating the sundial's ancient wisdom with timeless clarity. Time flies, love remains, not merely as sentiment inscribed in stone, but as living truth enacted through conscious choice, daily commitment, and the quiet dignity of love recognized rather than merely declared. In the silence that follows our tale, we are left to contemplate the profound truth that echoes through the corridors of Thane Manor. Dignity is not bestowed by circumstance, but cultivated through character. The true nobility that Elara embodied came not from bloodlines or inheritance, but from her unwavering commitment to truth, integrity, and quiet strength in the face of adversity. We learn that recognition, not rescue, forms the foundation of meaningful connection. The Duke did not save Elara. He saw her truly and completely, acknowledging the worth she already possessed. In turn, she recognized in him not merely his title or position, but his capacity for growth and renewal. Perhaps most poignantly, our story reminds us that reconciliation sometimes arrives in unexpected forms. While Margaret and Alexandra could never mend their broken relationship in life, healing flowed through generations, proving that it is never too late for truth to emerge and wounds to heal, if we have the courage to acknowledge them honestly. In our own lives, we face choices similar to those that confronted Elara and Rowan, whether to cling to appearances or embrace authenticity, whether to protect our pride or pursue reconciliation, whether to remain frozen in past wounds or step boldly into future possibilities. Like them, we discover that true dignity requires neither grandiose declarations nor public validation, only the consistent courage to embody our highest values, especially when doing so comes at personal cost. The seal of honor is not pressed into wax or metal, but imprinted upon character through countless choices that align with truth, even when falsehood might offer easier paths. As we close this chapter, may we carry forward the quiet wisdom that permeated North Vale's halls, that love in its most enduring form appears not as dramatic passion, but as steadfast recognition of another's inherent worth. Did this Victorian tale of dignity and recognition touch your heart? Subscribe to our channel for more immersive historical romances that transport you to worlds where true nobility resides in character rather than title. Leave a comment sharing which character's journey resonated most deeply with you. Was it Elara's quiet strength, Rowan's evolution from grief to hope, or perhaps another aspect of this tale of redemption? Your engagement helps our stories reach others, seeking the same emotional depth and meaningful reflection.